And gentlemen, we are back on the air. It's time for the only sports talk show that really matters right here on IUP-TV. Of course, we like to call it The Big Hit. Got a lot of sports to discuss. As always, our 60-minute discussion is going to begin in the National Hockey League, previewing the NHL's Eastern Conference and predicting what to expect with Mike Gosnell and Ben Snyder. Then we'll move into the Red Zone recap, discussing everything in the world of the National Football League and asking if it's time for a rebuild in the Steel City. Then we'll head over to college football at the Division I level, examining the latest top 25 poll and previewing the biggest matchups this upcoming week. Then it's the call to the bullpen. Major League Baseball, the playoffs are underway. We're going to update the playoff picture and examine what to expect in Major League Baseball. And then, of course, it's our Crimson Huddle, recapping the homecoming game and previewing IUP's showdown against the California Vulcans. IUP's won 15 of 18 on the road. Will that streak continue? We'll discuss it here on The Big Hit. Then, of course, Kyle Condor's here with the 2-minute drill. That's going to close us out. It's The Big Hit, ladies and gentlemen, on your television. Here's the intro. And welcome into The Big Hit. It's time to start our 60-minute discussion of all things sports, and we're going to begin in the penalty box with the National Hockey League. It's our NHL Eastern Conference preview, and the beards are here, ladies and gentlemen. It's the one behind the one in 90.1, Mike Gosnell, and in the middle, the graphics connoisseur himself, Ben Snyder. Guys, let's talk some hockey here. The season just getting underway, but still very early, enough time to preview the season as a whole. We're going to talk about the Eastern Conference here today. Probably the weaker conference in hockey, but still a lot of talent on a lot of teams as well. Let's begin in the Atlantic Division with the Boston Bruins, who underwent a few minor changes this offseason. They lost Jerome McGinley and recently traded away defenseman Johnny Boychuk. Are there any weaknesses to the Bruins? We finally got a chance to see them in game action a little bit this year.
And well, by first seeing them in game action, I can tell you that they are not the same Bruins. They don't look like it. They've only scored 4 goals in 4 games so far. Age is probably the biggest weakness I can really put my finger on with the Bruins. They're still going to be a very good team. Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, Zdeno Chara, although he is 37 years old, will still get the job done. They have a nice mix of youth in their bottom 6. Carl Soderberg, Ryan Spooner, Sean Griffiths are a couple of guys that could really see some major playing time for the Bruins. I just don't think their age is going to really benefit them. They're one of the older teams in the league. Zdeno Chara is a lug back there on the blue line. Really doesn't move that well. He's 6'9", so we can understand that. But overall, this is still going to be a very good team. They're experienced. They have the goal scoring. They have the setup guy in David Krejci, who's ready, in my opinion, to take a step to the next level in this season. But if I could put my finger on anything, it's definitely going to be age, because with Tampa Bay and Montreal being younger, that's definitely more dangerous if you're a Boston fan.
I agree. Chara, he's a lug, but he doesn't have to be mobile as a defenseman. He's a defensive defenseman. His job is to stand by the net and just prevent goals from going in and prevent players from getting too Rask and score goals. They lost Jerome McGinley, who's a 61-point player last year. It's hard to replace a player like that. You really can't find that many players out there in free agency or by trading that can get you 61 points. Defensively, aside from Chara, they have to depend on their young core guys like Torrey Krug and Dougie Hamilton to back up their defensive woes.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the Boston Bruins, of course, it's hard to replace Jerome McGinley. It's hard to be as good as they've been over the last number of years. One of the most consistent teams in all of hockey. You have to think they're going to take a step back sooner or later. We'll have to see if this is the year for that, if they'll continue their dominance. But let's go ahead and look at a team that I personally really like, and that's the Tampa Bay Lightning, getting a healthy Steven Stamkos and Ben Bishop back. Good mix of youth and experience for the Tampa Bay Lightnings. Can they win a very competitive Atlantic Division?
In my opinion, yes, they can. The sky's the limit for this team. Like you said, Josh Hill, a good mix of youth and experience. Getting Ryan Callahan from the New York Rangers was a very good move last year. He's proven to be a welcome addition back after signing a brand new contract. Ben Bishop, of course, is probably the most important player for them aside from Steven Stamkos. Just a stalwart between the pipes, very, very good. It was an absolute steal by Tampa Bay getting him from the Ottawa Senators. I think this team could win the division. We'll get to our picks later, of course, but I think the sky's the limit. Jonathan Drouin is ready to come to the NHL. He's going to make his debut very soon, and he's just going to add more skill and more scoring to the Tampa Bay Lightning, as if they already need it.
I agree with you too, Goose. The reason why Tampa Bay lost their playoff series last year was because of their goaltending. It was without Ben Bishop, it was just lacking, and Boston's getting older. And I think Tampa Bay, with their young players scoring, including Steven Stamkos, they can, I think, be able to catch Boston, maybe even overtake them, for first place in the division.
Yeah, you look at Tampa Bay, add Jonathan Drouin to all that skill that's already there, coming off a big 7-1 victory over the Montreal Canadiens just one night ago. Really impressive what they have been able to do. We'll see if this is finally the year of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Of course, staying healthy is a big part of that. They've had some really big injuries over the last number of years, but let's go ahead and look at a team that's rebuilding. Had a really bad year last year. Of course, I'm talking about the Buffalo Sabres. They did make some noise in the offseason, signing Brian Gionta. They traded for Josh Georges and drafted a super, super talented young prospect in Sam Reinhart. Miserable year last year for the Buffalo Sabres, to say the least, but will they take a step forward this year and accelerate that rebuild?
It's going to be very difficult. They don't have a lot of scoring, even though they did get Gionta and Matt Molson in the offseason. Last season, their leading scorer was Cody Hodgson, and he only had about 44 points. So you can tell that offense is really going to be an area where they need to improve. Ted Nolan has his work cut out for him. They started the year 0-3 now. They're facing a very just as bad Carolina Hurricanes team coming up. It's still early, but they're going to have a lot of work to do. They might take a step forward, but in rebuilding situations, you have to get some signings right. And I'm not sure that Brian Gionta signing was right for this team. Good veteran guy, but really you're taking a spot away from someone that's younger. Zemgus Girgensons comes to mind. But it's going to be very difficult. Another difficult year for the Sabres. They're going to have another lottery pick.
Could even be Connor McDavid with that lottery pick too. I think on paper they are the better team than the other team in the division, the Florida Panthers, but I feel like if they want to do anything with this rebuilding phase, they probably should tank and just go last place in the league, maybe even worse than Edmonton or Calgary, and just go for Connor McDavid because he is the next star in the NHL.
I don't necessarily agree with tanking, but in this case, when you have the next big thing in the NHL, Connor McDavid, I'm sure we're going to talk about him at some point on this show. An absolutely fantastic talent, once in a lifetime, and could be the next franchise changer.
Yeah, and whenever Connor McDavid makes his presence felt, I can tell you one thing, business will certainly be picking up in the National Hockey League, but a lot of bad teams. How about Florida and that horrible attendance the other day? You have to think the relocation rumors, if they weren't started already, they certainly are going to start churning as well. But let's go to a bit of a better note here and look at the Atlantic Division as a whole. Give me your division winners, breakout players, or any other big predictions for this year in the Atlantic Division.
Well, I was building up the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they're going to be my first team that's going to win this division. They're going to overtake Boston, I think, just their skill level, and they're a complete team, much like Boston. But their youth and I think they're more skilled actually than the Boston Bruins. I think that's going to win the day. Ben Bishop could have a Vezina winning trophy year, but of course you have to have the Boston Bruins in the mix. I have them at my number 2 spot. And at number 3, Montreal is going to have another great year. This is a really difficult division to pick winners, but if I had to go, that would be my top 3. And my fourth making the playoffs this year is the Detroit Red Wings. They'll continue that 22-year consecutive playoff streak. Bringing up the rear is Florida. Not really much to say there. They're going to be terrible as long as things go right. They could be for McDavid as well. Buffalo is the other one, and rounding that out is Ottawa and Toronto. But those are really interchangeable. It's going to be tough to predict those. But if all goes right, hopefully I'll be right. But I'm never right. So
I think this is the year that Detroit will not make the playoffs. This is Mike Babcock's swan song as the Detroit Red Wings coach. But his players have gotten too old, and they've lost what they used to have. And I don't think they'll be enough to make it to the playoffs this year. But back to the first one, I have Tampa Bay Lightning, Boston Bruins, Montreal all making playoffs, followed by Ottawa Senators and Detroit. I really couldn't pick which one will make which spot, so I'm just going to say Ottawa's taking the spot there only because of their younger core group of guys that are slightly more skilled than what Detroit has, but still not going to be enough, though. Rounding out the end, I have Toronto, Buffalo, then Florida.
Yeah, the Detroit Red Wings are certainly a team that have had the whole world in their hands as of late, making the playoffs 20-plus years in a row. We'll see if this is the year that streak finally comes to an end. But let's go ahead and move to the other division in the Eastern Conference, a little bit closer to home, a little bit more familiar with a lot of hockey fans around here, that, of course, being the Metropolitan Division. And it starts with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they underwent a very, very big overhaul this year after losing to the New York Rangers in 7 games in the playoffs. That was the final straw for the current regime, a new regime, head coach Mike Johnston, and some new players as well. Some trades were made. With a new regime behind the bench, what are your expectations for the new Pittsburgh Penguins this year?
I think it has to be Stanley Cup or bust again because they have the core to do it. They did the right thing by firing Dan Bylsma and Ray Shero. You needed a change. You needed a new voice in the organization. Things were not working. And had Henrik Lundqvist not had his fantastic play, maybe things wouldn't have changed. But you get a new voice in there. Mike Johnston, of course, coming from the Portland Winterhawks, is going to be a very interesting concept to what he wants to do. It's got to be Stanley Cup or bust. You have the team and you have the skill set, and you have to think that the expectations really haven't changed in Pittsburgh.
You get a new GM and Jim Rutherford, new coach, and Mike Johnston, as well as I think a new power play coach, a new offensive coach, as well as new players in Christian Ehrhoff, Patrick Hornquist, Nick Spaulding, Steve Downey, Thomas Greiss, just to name a few. I feel like they still want to win the Cup, and they are now trying to push a more possession-based team, to which Mike Johnston has been, just hammering down the players' throats ever since training camp, even before training camp started. I think this is the year the Penguins can come back to the Stanley Cup Finals and take the Cup back home to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and despite their 2-0 record, of course, playing the Dallas Stars on a Thursday should be a tremendous matchup there. You have to think there will be a bit of a learning curve with that new Mike Johnston system, a lot different from Disco Dan Bylsma. And the players have even said so themselves. They said there may be a learning curve. And the catalyst for all this change is who we're going to discuss next. That's the New York Rangers. The New York Rangers, rather, they were able to defeat the Penguins last year, and they made it the entire way to the Stanley Cup as well. They're looking to get back to the finals. Do you think the Rangers have the roster to get back, or do you think they'll fall just short again? Because with Henrik Lundqvist, you have to think that anything is possible.
And that's a good sentiment to have with Henrik Lundqvist, the best goalie in the world. You always have a chance to win. Not with this roster, though. They're not. They have a really slim chance of getting back of the two teams, LA being the other one. A lot of changes coming with this New York Rangers roster. Brian Boyle, Anton Strom, and Benoit Pouliot, all really important pieces to their Stanley Cup run. They're all gone. Bringing in Dan Boyle, Kevin Hayes from Boston College, Anthony Duclair, a young kid that's coming in from the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. He's only 19. They're going to run. They have run into some injury problems already. Boyle broke his hand, and of course Derek Stepan out 4 to 6 weeks with a fractured tibia. It's going to be difficult. If they can get Stepan and Boyle back healthier sooner rather than later, maybe business will pick up for the Rangers. It's just going to be really difficult for them to get back to where they once were. But I'll preface that by saying as long as Henrik Lundqvist can stay healthy and maintain his elite level of play, they always have a chance.
Lundqvist is the biggest question to the Rangers this season. If he can maintain his high level of play, possibly even win another Vezina and take the Rangers back to the Stanley Cup Finals and even win a cup for the team that hasn't won since 1994. They don't have many centers that are like NHL caliber centers. You just lost Derek Stepan to an injury, and the rest are just like you have Derek Brassard, and the rest are AHL players who are just floating around trying to earn a spot for their team. They brought in Lee Stepniak and Tanner DeLass this year, but if you looked at the Penguins, what they did for them last year, it wasn't too much. Like you didn't really say that they stood out for the Penguins. So it depends on what they can do for the bottom lines for them to see if they can bring the scoring or just the toughness and grit to that team to see if the Rangers can make it to the playoffs again this year.
I would hardly call Dominic Moore an AHL player, but I see where you're coming from, though. There's a lot of underutilized talent there.
Yeah, you certainly have to think the Rangers are going to have a journey through fire and brimstone to get back to the playoffs, especially because one of the teams in this division seems to be much improved, and that, of course, being the Washington Capitals. They add Barry Trotz as their head coach, bring in Matty Niskanen and Brooks Orpik. Very defensive-minded, and that's pretty apparent there with the players they signed. With Barry Trotz as the head coach in the defensive-minded system, doesn't really leave Alexander Ovechkin in the plans too much. How good do you think their relationship will be, that being Trotz and Ovechkin?
This could be much like what Dale Hunter and Ovechkin's relationship was when he was head coach. He left the team. That's how bad it was. He didn't want to deal with Alex Ovechkin and his superstar status. Go back to football here. Steve Mariucci and Terrell Owens really didn't have a great relationship, and that caused Mariucci to leave, or Terrell Owens to leave, actually. But it's going to take a lot of work on Barry Trotz's part, because Alex Ovechkin's not the easiest player to get along with. Bruce Boudreau has had some problems. Dale Hunter obviously left the team because of that. And just poor effort on defense. And if you're in a Barry Trotz coach team, watching Nashville for all those years, defense is the number one with him. Like, if you do not play defense, you will get benched. But at the same time, it's Alex Ovechkin. He's your best player, and he's the reason why the fans are there. So he has a really tough job ahead of him. Hopefully it works out. I mean, they've had some early success here in the regular season. It's still early, but it'll be interesting to see. That's definitely a good storyline to follow.
It certainly is. And with Barry Trotz coaching the Washington Capitals, it's interesting to see because Washington has never really been a defensive-minded team. Like, Mike Green has been their arguably best defenseman, and he's always been considered a fourth forward for them as well. With Nashville, Barry Trotz coaching Nashville, they had to stop by Shea Weber and Ryan Suter, two of the biggest defensemen in the league who could shut down any of the top centers in there. But with Mike Green and I think, which Carlson am I thinking of?
John
Carlson,
yep,
as their top line for defense. I don't see the Capitals really shutting down players as much. Speaking of Trotz and Ovechkin, though, Ovechkin had 51 goals last year, but was still a minus 35 in plus-minus statistics category. That's pretty pathetic. Most of his goals did come from power play, so that's not really affected into the plus-minus category. So let's say he had 20 goals outside of power play. He had to have been on the ice for at least 70 goals against to get that plus-minus of minus 35.
Yeah, and of course, if you really don't play defense as well, that could really impact that a lot. He's one of the only players in hockey that I can recall that just doesn't even put really much of an effort on the defensive end unless he's trying to transition over to offense. But enough about Alexander Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals. Perhaps let's go ahead and get your Metro Division picks, division winners, breakout players, etc.
I think Ben and I are unanimous on our first one. It's going to be the Pittsburgh Penguins. Just too much coming back, and some good additions as well. They're gonna take the Metro Division, the weakest division of the two in the Eastern Conference. New York Rangers, if they can get healthy and maintain some good level of play, they're in at my number 2 spot. Number 3 is the Columbus Blue Jackets for me. They have a lot of proving to do, but once they get their players back, I think this is going to be one of the more dangerous teams throughout the year. And rounding out the playoff picture, anyway, in the East is the New York Islanders, getting Johnny Boychuk, Nick Leddy, and getting Yaroslav Halak's a big addition for them. I think they're going to make the playoffs. New Jersey will just miss it. They're at my 5. Washington at 6. Philadelphia is going to have another down year, losing Kimmo Timonen and now Vinny Lecavalier for some time. I think that's going to be really bad for them. Of course, my pick for the worst team in the NHL this year, the Carolina Hurricanes. No Jordan Staal, no Jeff Skinner, no defense, and Cam Ward's not really as good as he once was. It's going to be a very dismal year for the Carolina Hurricanes.
I completely agree with you, except for a few facets. First of all, Pittsburgh's going to win the division, I think. That's true. Second one's going to be New York, also making playoffs. And third being the New York Islanders. As what you said, those key additions with goalies and forwards are going to bring to the table such a great offensive prowess and defense as well to the team that they can make it back to playoffs after missing last year. Fourth will be CBJ, because if they just keep doing what they're doing, and backed by Sergei Bobrovsky, they can make playoffs again. And fifth is New Jersey Devils, which will also make playoffs. I have 5 players from the Metro making playoffs. They just missed it last year because they didn't win a single shootout. But I think now, without Martin Brodeur losing them games for them, I think they can make playoffs this year. 6th will be Philly, 7th Washington, and 8th will be Carolina with one of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really going to be interesting to see what the new authority does in Pittsburgh as well, to see if the Penguins are able to win that division. But that's all the time we have here previewing the Eastern Conference. Great to have hockey back. Great to have the Beards back as well for Mike Gosnell and Ben Snyder. When these guys talk, you listen. That's the bottom line. We're going to send it to the National Football League and our Red Zone recap. Dimitri George will be here to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Probably will be pretty interesting. I'd stay tuned if I were you. This is the Big Hit.
How are we gonna watch this when you are just in La La Land? This is embarrassing.
Is that bad?
Look at you.
You know, I thought this was a pretty good segment.
Did you?
Yeah.
Do you even know what they're saying?
No.
You're putting your foot up on set. You just think this is a couch? This is embarrassing. I mean, even here, you're starting to interrogate somebody. Look at you. Turn your back to the camera. That's embarrassing. Where's your suit and tie? You have a Pirates shirt on.
They made the playoffs.
I don't care. You can't be biased. This is ridiculous. Ay, Dios mío.
And welcome into the Big Hit, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to talk some football here in the Red Zone recap. Plenty to discuss, of course, with the Blues Brothers, Cody Benjamin and Dimitri George. Guys, I think we know where we're going to start. That's right here in our backyard with the Pittsburgh Steelers. A 31-10 rout at the hands of the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland was favored, but I don't know if anybody expected this. Does this signal a need for a rebuild for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Just not really clicking at all right now.
Well, I don't know if you can ever call for a rebuild in the middle of the season, and I don't think the Steelers will do that, especially with Mike Tomlin at the helm. Obviously, they've got problems. Against the Browns, it looked like there were holes in the secondary. They couldn't really stop the run that well either, and obviously, offensively, the red zone was continued. I think you have to reevaluate that at the end of the season if these issues continue to be evident throughout the season, but I don't think we can talk about that right now. Steelers are still well in the mix for that division race, so I would say that's something you got to reevaluate at the end of the season.
You know, when I look at this football team, Cody and Josh, you know, you talk about the 70s Steelers, the 2005 team that won the Super Bowl, the 08 team that won the Super Bowl, and the 2010 team, that reached the Super Bowl. People have so high expectations for the Steelers year in and year out that a season where last year they started 0-4, but were able to climb back in and get into the race at the end of the year, and now a team that's 3-3 that looks like a team that could potentially, struggle throughout the rest of the season here with no signs of improvement on the defensive side of the ball. Teams are running all over them. They can't cover anybody. Mike Tomlin reportedly has called his team mentally and physically soft and not tough, that's the word he used. So when you look at this football team, to answer your question, I don't think they're going to rebuild, obviously. As Cody mentioned, it's really tough to do that in the middle of the season. I look for them to start plugging in and playing new guys, maybe changing the personnel up a little bit, as Mike Tomlin hinted in his press conference this week. Change some things going on. Maybe Bryce McCain starts to play a little more. With Steve McClellan out, you might see Daniel McCullers, the 6th-round pick. And there's also various other things that they could do on both sides of the ball that I think that maybe that'll change some things and they'll start playing better. And I'm all for playing the young guys. Just at this point at 3-3, I know I'm not jumping ship for the season, but I think you need to do something to get this ship righted, because right now, defensively, like I mentioned, they can't stop the run, they can't cover anybody, and offensively, they struggle in the red zone and they're not putting up points. And 3-3 record that's what they are.
Yeah, 3-3. They're a 500 team, and they've been a 500 team over the past number of years. 19-19 over the past 2 years, and this has really been a couple of years in the making for the Pittsburgh Steelers. 3 really important games, so make or break for the season. You have to consider it. I know it's very early.
3 games at home.
Exactly. You've got Indianapolis, Baltimore,
and Houston
coming up on Monday. A very uber competitive AFC North. But let's go ahead and look at another team here in the AFC North. That, of course, being the Cleveland Browns after a really good win, an unexpected win as well. They've got a lot of confidence going forward. Do you think these guys are for real?
Well, personally, coming into the season, I didn't see the Browns doing this well early on. I think it's mainly because of the question mark that Brian Hoyer was, but I think he's kind of headlined what Cleveland has done so well this season early on, and it's been just being efficient. Obviously, only 1 interception for him, and I think with the ground game, too, not only Ben Tate, who missed a little bit of time, but they've got the ground game working, and that's obviously helping him out. The defense hasn't been quite as solid as they have been in recent years, but I thought they did a good job in pass coverage against the Steelers. And I think it's just efficiency that's really highlighting their early season success. And if they can continue that, I mean, all the talks about Johnny Manziel, rightfully so, should be quieted.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was at the beginning of the season thought that they had a pretty, looking back at their start of the season, they had a pretty rough schedule coming out. Games against Pittsburgh, Baltimore, New Orleans. And I was fully expecting to have Johnny Manziel be playing right now at this point. Obviously, that is not the case. Brian Hoyer, as you said, has been playing really well. The largest comeback playing on the road in NFL history a couple weeks back against Tennessee. Brian Hoyer let him back, and they almost let him back in the opener against the Steelers. So you look at this football team, they've got a pretty soft schedule coming up. They've got games against Jacksonville, I think Washington, a couple of soft teams on their schedule. And you look at that, they're going to get Josh Gordon back too. Add that to that running game, and you've got guys like Travis Benjamin's playing well, the young guy Gabriel that's playing well. Their defense, I think, is going to get it together. They're ranked at the bottom of the league right as we sit here right now. But they've got high pedigree guys as Carlos Dansby, Dante Whitner. Joe Hayden, who's coming out of that big contract, struggling a little bit. He's a little banged up as we speak. But they've got guys, and they're decimated along that defensive line. But I expect them to play better on defense as the season goes on. So I fully expect the Browns to be competitive.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the main problems with Cleveland is they haven't really been able to put 4 quarters together, of course, with the exception of last week. But there have been games, played a good first half, played a good second half, of course. Falling down 28-3 at Tennessee isn't very good, but they were able to pull off the biggest road comeback in NFL history. So, kind of both sides of the spectrum there.
Inconsistent, but yeah. That's why I think they'll right the ship and they'll be able to put 4 quarters. They got 3 quarters. In the first quarter, the Steelers looked pretty good in this past week, but the last 3 quarters, obviously, the Cleveland Browns took control of that game.
Yeah,
I feel like you could say the same thing about the Steelers. I mean, we've seen both sides. Like in the Carolina game, Pittsburgh looked like a dominant team. You might think they're going to the playoffs.
In the first half against Cleveland, the opener.
Yeah, so it's a matter of consistency as well with everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we motor through this segment, we invite you to use the hashtag BluesBrothers to discuss this as well. And the New England Patriots, let's go ahead and talk about them. They did win against the Buffalo Bills, but that's not really what everybody's talking about. It's talking about the downfall of Tom Brady. Do you think we've seen the last of the elite Tom Brady, or does he still have a little bit left in the tank?
No, I still think he's got plenty left in the tank. I think just as with any quarterback, you can compare numbers, and obviously he's on the latter end of his career with his age. But I think as long as you give any quarterback good protection, and obviously Tom Brady being the quarterback we're talking about, if you give him time and allow him to make plays, he's going to pick apart the defense. I don't have any concerns with Tom Brady, and I think he was excited to come out and prove all the doubters wrong this past week.
Given the time for this segment, I'm going to channel my inner Bill Belichick and just simply say we're on to the Jets.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. That's perfect. And that's what we're looking to here. Philadelphia Eagles picked up a nice win over the New York Giants. A very convincing win as well. And they are really in good position there in that NFC East division, of course, leading the division with the Dallas Cowboys. So of these 2 teams, the Eagles and the Cowboys, who do you have winning the division quickly here?
Well, I like the Cowboys' offense better, but I'm going to pick the Eagles just because so far this year they're 5-1. They haven't had a healthy offensive line. They're going to get guys back. Michael Kendricks on the other side of the ball should be coming back for the latter part of the season. So I'm going to go with the Eagles down the stretch.
If you would have asked me this question last week, Josh, I would have said the Philadelphia Eagles. But it showed a lot to me about the Dallas Cowboys being able to go into Seattle and defeat the defending champions, being able to run the ball. Tony Romo was able to make some big throws, the one to Terrence Williams and that game-winning drive. And that defense is playing really well right now. Give a lot of credit to Rod Marinelli, the defensive coordinator. A guy like Rolando McClain's a definite comeback player of the year candidate. So I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys. I like how they're playing right now. But this could change in the course of the season, obviously. But right now, as I sit here today, I got the Cowboys.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks here. They fell to the Cowboys, probably one of the best wins of the year for Dallas. 30-23 was the final score. But look at Seattle, 3-2 on the year. I don't know how many people expected that. Are there any concerns with the way Seattle's playing, and what do they have to do to correct these problems? Because not all is well in the world of the defending Super Bowl champions.
Well, I think there's concerns on both sides of the ball. Marshawn Lynch hasn't had that many touches in recent weeks, also on the defensive side of the ball. In the secondary, they've had some injuries, but also they've only had 7 sacks, if I'm not mistaken, so far this season. And obviously that's not the Seattle defense that we saw last year. So I think they're fixable issues, but they do need to be corrected. I think everyone hypes them up to be, this dominant team, and they still have the capability to be that dominant team, but they do have these issues, both sides of the ball, that need to be fixed.
I think defensively they'll be fine, but offensively, like you said, Marshawn Lynch only got 11 touches against Dallas and 22 against Washington, which is right around that 20 to 25 range he should be getting week in and week out. But offensively, I think that Chris Carter has been harping on this for years now about the Seattle Seahawks and their lack of productivity from the wide receiver position. Doug Baldwin obviously was very I guess what the word is, animated after the game against Dallas, his frustration. So if I'm looking at the Seahawks defensively, I think they'll be fine. Offensively, I like to see Russell Wilson play a little bit better, play more within the pocket, look for receivers down the field, use Marshawn Lynch in the passing game. They're going to be fine overall. Offensively, it worries me a little bit. Their inconsistent play, but once the weather turns and it starts raining up in Seattle, they'll get back to ground and pound football, and they'll be able to play action, and they'll be all right.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Seattle, of course, Percy Harvin is a big X factor as well. He has the ability to break a game open in favor of the Seahawks. Has done it some. Not very consistently. You see the result, 3-2 record for the Seahawks, but that's all the time we have here in the Red Zone Recap. Always good to talk some football with these guys, Cody Benjamin and Dimitri George. Stay tuned, everybody, because we're going to move into the world of college football in just a moment right here on The Big Hit.
Students in communications media at Indiana University of Pennsylvania can focus on a variety of areas, including media promotions. Our promotion students learn their skills by working in a hands-on environment, gaining real-world experience. They learn how to use media to promote, produce, and manage events, and how media organizations operate. They create promotional campaigns and help clients pitch their services, products, and events. With excellent classes led by experienced teachers, the Communications Media Department at IUP is perfect for students interested in media promotions.
Welcome back into The Big Hit. It's time to talk some college football, this time at the Division I level with our campus scramble. Guys, let's just jump right into it with Freddie Mitchell and John Williams. What a week in college football. A new top 25 rankings are out, and Mississippi State has actually leapfrogged Florida State as the best team in the country following their win against the Auburn Tigers. Do you agree with the Bulldogs being number 1 in the land?
Oh, yeah, this is well-deserved for Mississippi State. The last 3 weeks they've been battling hard, and they've beaten 3 top teams back-to-back in the top 10. So, of course, they're going to jump over Florida State, who hasn't really played anyone. You have to look at the schedule right now. Florida State hasn't played anyone besides Clemson a few weeks ago, and they barely beat Clemson in overtime. So, of course, Mississippi is going to jump Florida when you look at the strength of the schedule right now with the teams that Mississippi's been playing. But with that being said, Mississippi State is only 1 point ahead of the Seminoles in the USA Today poll and about 70 points ahead in the AP poll. So that's really not that big of a gap. If Florida State comes out this week and if they give it to Notre Dame and they have a very convincing win against Notre Dame, then I could easily see Florida State just jumping right back to number 1.
I'll agree with Freddie. They play 5 ranked teams. Well, they're planning to play 5 ranked teams. They already beat LSU, Texas A&M, and Auburn, and they're doing a good job. They're running well. Dak Prescott and Josh Robinson, they combined for about over 1,200 yards, I think, about that much. And they're playing well and they're putting points on the board. They're putting a lot of points on the board. So I think they deserve it. I mean, they're 6-0. They haven't lost, so I think they deserve that shot.
Yeah, they're playing in the SEC, the hardest conference in all of the league, all the land. So I don't understand why they wouldn't be ranked number 1.
Absolutely, and the top 25 polls are certainly going to be impacted after this week because we've got a pretty big showdown on the horizon at Doak Campbell Stadium. It's Notre Dame and Florida State from Tallahassee. Who leaves that game undefeated, guys?
Oh, I like the Seminoles in this game. Earlier today, reports came out saying that 5 Notre Dame players were just suspended, so that's going to hurt their chances. And also, with Notre Dame's performance last week against North Carolina's quarterback was able to run all over Notre Dame. They put up 43 points. If Jameis Winston is able to do the same thing and run around, and if he's able to find receivers that throw to the ball, I don't see any problem with Florida State in this game. I could easily see them beating Notre Dame by 10, especially a night game at Florida State. Oh, Seminoles, you're going to hear the chants, you're going to hear the crowd. And Notre Dame doesn't come to play at these big games. I remember countless games of Notre Dame showing up and they just poop the bed. And that's that. Like, that's Notre Dame. They come to these big games and they don't do anything. Title game, I've seen USC numerous times, and they just don't come to perform at these big games. So I don't really give Notre Dame really any much of a chance to win.
Well, I'm going to go against you on that one, Freddie.
They're national champs.
I mean, listen, they're 2012 team.
Yeah, they're national champions.
It's not the same as this Notre Dame team. This is a strong, stingy defense here. They're like ranked 8th in the nation in defense. Their offense is getting better and better each week. I mean, Golston he needs to stop turning over the ball, but he threw over for like 300 yards last game. And I mean, it was a gunfight last week. I mean, they played hard. I think they can beat Florida State. They just have to shut down Rasheed Green. He's a speedster. Their defense is strong, so I feel as though they're going to win by 3 points at least.
I'm telling you right now, if Jameis Winston is making plays on his feet and he is finding other receivers besides Rasheed Green, because obviously he's going to be double teamed, they're winning this game by at least 10 points. It's going to be close, but I'm telling you, they're winning this game by 10 points. There's no way Notre Dame is coming out.
Can he get to the other team? I mean, can he get to the other players? I mean, will he throw?
Yeah,
you think they'll get open?
Guarantee. They just gave up 43 points to North Carolina. It's not even ranked.
It was a good game.
Defense wins big games.
Eighth in the nation.
And they just gave up 43 points last week.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, we're going to reel it back on over here as Notre Dame, it seems like every time they have the ability to really go into that upper echelon, they lose some big games. Here's an opportunity for the Fighting Irish to really take that next step. Being at Florida State certainly going to be a detriment to them. That home field advantage should be rocking for Florida State. Going to be probably the game of the week. I think we can all agree on that. But let's go ahead and look at a game that happened last week, and that was the Alabama Crimson Tide and Arkansas. It was not a very good game. Alabama coming out with a 14-13 victory. I don't think many people expected that. What's wrong with the Crimson Tide offense right now?
I think the Crimson Tide are just in a little bit of a slump right now. I don't really think there's any major issues. They're just in that little mid-season slump. I mean, obviously no one expected them to come out this week and put up only 14 points. I think the biggest thing that's hurting them is Adrian McCarron graduated, so that's that's huge to their offense. But honestly, no. Their offense has been averaging 35 points a game throughout 8 games so far this season, so I really don't think their offense is, it's tailed off a little bit. They were averaging a little bit more last year, but it's not tremendous. Look this week against they have A&M coming into town this week. I think that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but it's Alabama. They should be able to handle their business. I think Blake Sims has a few touchdown passes and roll Tide.
I feel that. I feel as though they just need to get their head on straight. They're just not thinking clearly right now. Blake Sims needs to orchestrate the offense. I feel as though once he's able to figure out what's going on, and I believe he can make the team do something here. They need to convert on the third downs. They're not. It was 4 for 15 last game, and the offensive line. I think they hit the gym. I think they need to. They're getting pushed back every play. I don't know what's going on. They need to open up the running lanes for the running back and let them do something. Let them do something and protect the ball. Protect the ball. They had a couple fumbles and too many stupid penalties. I think if they just be more disciplined, more sound, they can bounce back and be a solid team again.
Yeah, absolutely. Too bad Nick Saban's not going to be able to suit up and play quarterback for the Crimson Tide, but I do think he'll try to get these boys ready heading into the SEC play. But let's go ahead and take a look at things in the big picture here. Which team out of the top 4 has the best chance of getting into the top 4 and making that college football playoff?
Quite simply, I think the winner of this Notre Dame-Florida State game is right in the driver's seat into the 4th seed of this little playoff system here. But honestly, we're only halfway through the season. It's wide open still. You have all of those teams in the SEC still there in the top 10. If somehow Mississippi State has a little fumble and they lose a game, and then you have, the loser of this Notre Dame Florida State game. Now you have a bunch of one-loss teams in there, and that's really going to open things up. Look towards, once we get towards conference championship time, for things to really be settled, especially in the SEC when everything is still wide open. That is a conference that's going to decide who the top 4 will be for the little playoff bracket we're going to have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep it short, just going off what you said. I mean, I think Notre Dame and the Florida State game is going to determine who's going to bump up. Like I said, again, Notre Dame's 8th in the nation, so, I mean, their offense is getting better. I mean, I feel as though as long as they're disciplined, I mean, I think they can make some noise and handle it for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And rest of the season, we are halfway through. So let's go ahead and take a look at our Heisman candidates here. Who has an edge in the Heisman race to this point? I think I know where you're going to go, Freddie.
Well, a few weeks ago, I said Mariota was my favorite. I still like Marcus a lot. Still like what he's doing in Oregon. He's still right there. He's definitely going to New York. There's no doubt about it. But my new little dark horse coming out of the pack is Dak Prescott from number 1 now, Mississippi State. I mean, he's been doing well. He's been leading his team through, like I said, these last 3 games, beating all these top 10 teams. He's got some big challenges coming up ahead. He's got to stay on pace, keep doing what he's doing. So far, though, he has 1,478 yards on 14 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. So far, he's looking real nice. He's definitely giving Marcus a run for his money. Look for these 2 quarterbacks to be doing it up for the rest of the season for the Heisman.
Well, then I'm going to be Freddie from 2 weeks ago then, because I mean I'm going with Marcus Mariota. He's
still
he has a
great.
QBR rating of 89.6, and he's completed over 69% of his passes. And what stands out to me, he's thrown over 17 touchdowns. He's thrown 17 touchdowns. He has not thrown 1 interception all season, and he's ran for 5 touchdowns. I feel as though as long as his line protects him, he's been sacked 15 times. And he's only been sacked like 17 and 18 times each year. And this is only halfway through the season. So they keep him off the ground. I mean, I think he's gonna take first place.
The only reason why I have him his stock is just slowly decreasing a little bit is, like you just said, his completion percentage has dropped just a little bit. And his pace for the amount of touchdowns that he had has also just slightly decreased a little bit. So right now I have Marcus on that slight decline in his stock, but there's still plenty of time. We're only halfway through. Plenty of time for Marcus to come back up and take that number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like Marcus Mariota was playing on rookie mode. They might have increased it to pro mode, but we'll see if he's able to keep up the good work. And we'll certainly be following college football throughout the season. Really big week coming up. A lot of great games. That's going to do it here for our campus scramble for Freddie Mitchell and John Williams. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to look at the MLB playoffs in just a moment right here in our Call to the Bullpen. We'll be right back.
Listen, all I'm saying is LeBron James is better than Michael
Oh,
Jordan.
Why did everybody get so quiet?
And welcome into the Big Hit, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to talk some Major League Baseball in our Call to the Bullpen with Kyle Condor and Vincent Lowry. Guys, playoff baseball is here, one of the best times of the year. The hunt for October is certainly in full swing. And let's go ahead and discuss the ALCS game featuring the Kansas City Royals and the Baltimore Orioles. What is the formula for success in this series to have one team come out on top?
I mean, the teams have proved that the formula to success is good pitching throughout the playoffs so many years now, but these 2 teams have shown that consistency is key, and the Royals obviously have more to this point. They've won 9 straight playoff games dating back to '85, but 6 this season, 3 more, and they tie the record that the Yankees have done twice now. Eric Hosmer and Lorenzo Cain are 2nd and 3rd in postseason batting average amongst players with 22 batting plate appearances, and the Orioles have only had 1 player even appear at the plate 22 times this season, in Nick Markakis. So they kind of need to spread the love around their lineup a little bit. Now you have the Royals. Greg Holland has only allowed 1 earned run, their closer, in 6 innings. He has 4 saves to this point. So I just think consistency is key in this series right now, and the Royals have shown that they have more of that.
I totally agree with you, Kyle, actually. Their pitching game is very consistent, and that's what they need in this playoff situation. But I also believe that their unsuccess from years past, like how long they haven't been in like this position before, I believe like they're trying to make up for lost time, and they're trying to show that they really want it this time, that they're very determined. And they finally like took the time to realize that maybe they are a young team, but also they have great talent, and they can put the whole team in use in all aspects, offensively and defensively.
Right, and they have the most homegrown players amongst all the teams that participated in the playoffs in the American League in 13. So that's proving to be something that's definitely helped them.
Yeah, and there's a team every year normally in the playoffs that kind of gels, kind of gets right at the right time, and the Kansas City Royals are certainly that example this year. Not a lot of really household names as far as star power is concerned, but a lot of guys just doing their job, and them and the Orioles certainly a good matchup as well in the American League Championship Series. But let's go ahead and look at the National League Championship Series. The Giants leading the Cardinals after today. Who's going to win this series?
In my opinion, it's got to be the Giants. As you mentioned, they're up 2-1 now. The next two games are in San Francisco. They haven't lost the playoff series under Bruce Bochy yet. That's 7 playoff series victories, going for 8 now. They have Vogelsong matching up against Shelby Miller in the next game. Clearly, they have the advantage there. Madison Bumgarner up against Wainwright in the next game. That's a marquee matchup. Those two pitchers that they have going in the next 2 games have only allowed 3 earned runs over 29-plus innings so far in the playoffs. That's remarkable. And that's not taking anything away from what the Cardinals have done. Obviously, Matt Carpenter and Colton Wong are putting on a show out there. I just don't think that they're going to be able to outdo what the Giants have done to this point, and that's pitched the baseball really well.
I totally agree with you on that. Also, I believe that the Giants will also end up with a W. Bruce Bochy, they've won 2 World Series under him, like you said. And also, Cardinals are a very seasoned team. However, their pitching is just phenomenal. I love their coaching staff, and I think that their pitching and coaching staff will definitely pull them through on this series.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's pretty much all we have here. Not a lot of games to talk about, only 2 series going on, and we're not going to get into free agents and all that good stuff. So thanks a lot, guys. Our call to the bullpen with Kyle Condor and Vincent Lowry. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, because we're going to talk some IUP football coming up next in the Crimson Huddle. Stay tuned.
Today I'm going to talk about Patty. Patty's best characteristics, she's stupid. Stupid and ugly. Everything she does is ugly. Watch her eat. Watch her stuff her face. Look at her. Greasy hair, dirty fingernails. It makes me want to vomit. Get a life, Patty. Thank you.
Into the big hit, it's time to talk a little IUP football here in the Crimson Huddle, and we've got a great crew to do that as always here from the Crimson Hawk Sports Network. Joining us, made his broadcasting debut on Saturday, and he's here to discuss the game. Today, it's Dakota London, and in the middle, it's the man behind the scenes in 90.1, the board operator, Malusi Kitchen. Guys, let's talk some IUP football here as the Crimson Hawks return home for a homecoming matinee showdown against the Seton Hill Griffins. An absolutely wild game, wouldn't you say? 51-28 was the final score. Let's get your thoughts on that real quick.
Well, the game was certainly exciting. The score makes it seem like it's a blowout, but for anyone that saw it, it was a lot closer than you would assume. And going into the fourth quarter, the score was 30-28. But let's just talk about some of the record-breaking performances. They had Darren Bradley ties the record for most rushing touchdowns before. You have Walt Pegues, he sets the record for longest return touchdown with 96 yards, breaking Barry Buffner's 45-year-old record. Then Brett Allman, now the all-time leader in points with 157, surpassing Craig Burgess. They had a really good, exciting game. But trust me, Seton Hill had his moments. They shot themselves in the foot a couple times with some turnovers. They had 3 interceptions, but it was a good game.
Yeah, I would agree. IUP, I think, defensively had the toughest challenge yet for this year. The offense actually clicked. You know, you could see it was a back-and-forth type of game. No one team could really catch the momentum, especially like you said, Dakota, with those 3 interceptions that they had. It really made for an exciting game. I think most of all, the offense definitely clicked in the fourth quarter. They scored, I believe it was 24 fourth quarter points, and they just really put them on them. And that's how you want to finish a game. You know, they finish strong. You know, it's not how you start, it's how you finish, and they definitely finished strong because, like I said, it was a back and forth type of game, and they really showed that going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and talking with Coach Signetti after this one, he certainly said with no hesitation this was the wildest game he has ever been a part of as the head coach of the IUP Crimson Hawks, and that's very interesting considering some of the wild finishes that have happened here at IUP over the years. But as we said, this game was not as close as the final score indicates. 51-28, IUP really dominated in the fourth quarter, but the Crimson Hawks defense was picked apart by that dink and dunk passing attack of Seton Hill. Are there any concerns moving forward with this IUP Crimson Hawks defense?
Well, certainly there are some very strong concerns. For instance, throughout the game, they lost 4 starters at one point. One of those being Aquino Robertson, who plays a key factor in the secondary. They really struggled against the quick passing game. Quarterback Drew Jackson for Seton Hill, he had 300 yards in the first half. Now, he went 44 for 71 with 440 yards, which shattered every record that for opponents to ever play IUP. Now, 4 different players had more than 60 yards receiving, including F.J. Williams, who's the Seton Hill star receiver, and Jarvis McClain, who had a combined 24 catches for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's not okay. Now, everyone knew going into this game that Seton Hill's receivers were going to cause some problems because they were all 6'3" and bigger. So it would be a good test for a secondary that really wasn't proven yet. But they really struggled against them. Now, defensively on the run, they only allowed 14 yards, but they really struggled with the pass.
Yeah, I would agree. I think they need to sharpen up their middle a little bit. They kind of let too much, space. It opened up their passing game with the running game, and I definitely think that their safeties need to do and their cornerbacks need to do a better job of covering these receivers in the coming games because they did not do a good job of covering them. They got loose a couple times, and they were for some big plays. So you don't want that to happen, especially when you get into the later part of the season, when it gets to crunch time. If it's a close game like this was, you're going to have to be able to, rely on the defense if the offense can't produce like they did in the fourth quarter. But overall, I thought the defense did an amazing job. They gutted it out, and they just had they had a solid performance, I would say. I'm not going to say excellent because, there were some problems here and there, but they had a solid performance.
Yeah, and this really just goes to show what a good quarterback and a couple of tall receivers are able to do. Drew Jackson getting the ball, quick passes, Seton Hill able to gain 30 yards. They had trouble gaining that 1 yard when they really needed it. They had a couple of instances, 1st and goal from the 1, some 3rd down and 1s, 4th down and 1 kind of situations. IUP was able to stop Seton Hill in those situations. So Seton Hill a little dink and dunk, but in the end, IUP coming out with a big victory and looking ahead. This time for the schedule to turn over here. Second half of the season officially underway, and it is not a very easy portion of the schedule for IUP. They've got the California Vulcans coming up this week. California fresh off a absolute massacre of the Slippery Rock Pride on their home field. California, with that victory now, puts all 3 of those teams, IUP, Slippery Rock, and Cal, in a 3-way tie for first place in the PSAC West. But let's take a look at that road game. California, a team predicated on the run. IUP, a very good rushing defense. Looks like we might have a little war of attrition here.
Yeah, and it's funny because we talked about that during the commercials during the game that, if Slippery Rock lost to Cal, there's a 3-way tie. So Cal is the 6th-ranked scoring offense overall. And you talked about their running game, but their passing game is no joke. They average 291 yards in the pass. IUP's defense against the run has been stellar thus far, but I have strong concerns about them dealing with the pass. Now, if Kyle makes a concerted effort to run the ball and it's successful, that's only going to make things worse. If they move to the pass and IUP has learned from their mistakes against Seton Hill and they're able to slow it down, they may be in good shape. But they're going to be playing at Kyle. And like you said, they beat Slippery Rock with no problem at all. This is going to be certainly a very tough game.
Yeah, absolutely. And another player I think is going to be an extreme challenge for IUP is James Harris, their quarterback. He's been playing exceptional for Cal, and the fact that you mentioned, like, if they don't learn from their problems and mistakes that they had, we'll see him with some of these bigger receivers, you know, the way he can manipulate the defense, and since they're young and inexperienced, it's going to be a little tough for them to maybe read some of his calls and stuff like that to find out what the offense is going to be like. So I think they need to be on their extra P's and Q's, being able to prepare for this game, because this is going to be a tough one. It's the Cold Bowl. The winner of this game is going to take home a trophy, so this is for all the Marbles right now in the season. It's an important game for them, coming off of a win that, you know, was closer than what it expected to be. But I think this is going to be a good test for IUP to see where they stand right now here in the midway point through the season.
And they've got SRU right after that game.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is going to be a tough stretch for IUP.
Absolutely.
Yeah, follow that up with a trip to Gannon as well, and a pretty hellacious slate of games for the IUP Crimson Hawks. But for Cal, you have to think the game plan is going to be very similar. Of course, they tried to stop that run for Slippery Rock, wanted Slippery Rock to throw the football with their backup quarterback in. They really loaded up the box. Cal was able to shut down the Slippery Rock rushing attack, force Slippery Rock to throw the football, and you see the result. You have to think that Cal's going to try to do the same thing, and for IUP, they're probably going to look to shut down the rushing attack as well. So it could be a 1st to 20 kind of game at Adamson Stadium. Kickoff Saturday at 1 o'clock. IUP winning on homecoming. They've got Cal coming up this week. That's going to do it here for the Crimson Huddle for Dakota London and Malusi Kitchen. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, because coming up next, Kyle Condor's in studio. I'm sure he's got props, sound effects, and everything in the 2-minute drill. We'll be right back.
Hi all, Kyle D. Condor here. Boy, is this a festive time of year because the NHL season is underway, hence the reason why I've got this jersey on. And of course, the Penguins are 2-0, so why not? But it is early, especially considering 10 other teams share that record with the Penguins. But this isn't the only jersey I've got on. The NBA season is almost here too. That's right, we're a week away from following the most over-dramatized 82-game season in all of sports. From now until June, we're going to hear full-blown coverage about Derrick Rose's knee, LeBron James' hairline, Kobe Bryant's age. After all, they don't have much to talk about in that league, since really only 4 or 5 teams have any shot at winning the league's title. It's not like this league, where rather than predicting a Super Bowl winner, you should probably just throw all 32 team names into a hat, pick one out, and go with them, because the NFL is certainly up for grabs this year. Whereas the Major League Baseball season is down to 4. And yes, I know, this team has no shot at holding the title, but I'll tell you what they do hold. The MLB record for most consecutive postseason victories, 12. And they've done it twice over a span of years back in the 20s and 30s, and again in the 90s. But one team is 3 consecutive wins away from tying that record this year, the Kansas City Royals. They won the last 3 games of the 1985 World Series and failed to reach the playoffs until now, and they're at it again, having won their first 6 games in hopes of winning the franchise's 2nd title. Oh, and in case you didn't know, the U.S. men's soccer team plays at Honduras tonight as well. This is too good to be true. I gotta go watch some sports. For producer Dimitri George and director Danielle Eberly, I'm Kyle Condor. Peace.